Good morning. I'm Scott Peyton, the State Director for Right on Crime here in Louisiana. Welcome to Right on Crime's first of 5 webinars that will focus on second chance hiring. I'd like to welcome today's guest, Representative Barbara Carpenter, and Senator Mike Reese was going to join us, but his district suffered heavy damage during Hurricane Laura. They're out of internet and their phone service is shoddy. So we're going to have Miss Julie Warren, who's the National Director for Right on Crime, and she's in Tennessee. She will be filling in for Senator Reese today. This webinar was originally scheduled for last week. As I mentioned earlier, the hurricane, which was one of the most powerful storms ever to make landfall, struck Southwest Louisiana. Our thoughts and prayers are certainly with everyone here in Louisiana and Texas who have been affected by Hurricane Laura. It's so refreshing to see everyone come together as to help out our fellow Louisianians in their time of need. Special thanks to everyone who has joined us today virtually for our webinar series. Just a little background about the focus of our webinar series. For the past 2 years, Right on Crime has sponsored employer engagement forums across the state of Louisiana to support second chance hiring of the formerly incarcerated and persons with criminal records. Due to COVID-19 concerns and in an effort to reach a larger audience, we are changing the format and moving our forums to a virtual format. These webinars will be made available on Right on Crime's website at www.rightoncrime.com, and also located on our website, you'll be able to find a digital version of our employer handbook. And links to both our website and the handbook can be found in the chat area of the Zoom webinar. These webinars are also approved for 1 hour of continuing education for Society of Human Resource Manager members. The activity ID can be found in the chat bar or emailed to you upon your request. Each month, we'll have 2 panelists to discuss a variety of topics related to employing the formerly incarcerated. We'll also hear from formerly incarcerated persons who will share the difficulties they encountered after being released and how receiving a second chance has contributed to their successful reintegration back into society. And just a little housekeeping, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, be sure and enter your question into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. During the last 15 minutes of the webinar, I will go over the questions and we will ask them to our panelists today. Today's topic will focus on the 2020 legislative session and will highlight some of the legislation that was passed that continues to move Louisiana forward and helps make Louisiana reentry ready. And just a little background on our topic today. The Department of Corrections here in Louisiana releases over 18,000 people back into society each year. Unfortunately, in 5 years, 43% of these people will return back to prison. This cycle, which is known as recidivism, costs taxpayers millions of dollars each year, not to mention the toll that it takes on families, especially the children of those persons incarcerated. So in an effort to reduce recidivism and to protect the public, which is our main priority, and to save taxpayer dollars and allow those persons who return from prison a second chance at succeeding in society, it's important that employers do not exclude this population as a potential pool to hire from. Studies have shown that unemployment is a major predictor of recidivism. Representative Carpenter and Senator Reese each introduced resolutions during the 2020 special session that encouraged government agencies and private businesses to work together to recognize the value of justice-involved persons that they bring to our workplace, to society, and to encourage them to act with intention to empower, train, and employ these individuals. We will start with Representative Carpenter. Representative Carpenter represents District 63, which is East Baton Rouge Parish. She is the Dean of International Education and University Outreach at Southern University in Baton Rouge. She received her Bachelor of Science in Vocational Education and General Studies and a Master's of Education in Secondary Education and Administration from Southern University. She has a PhD in Adult and Occupational Education and International Education from Kansas State University. She chairs the Labor and Industrial Relations Committee. She's a member of the Appropriations, Joint Legislative Committee on the Budget, House Select Leadership Committee. She's the Vice Chair for Louisiana Legislative Black Caucus and a member of the Capital Region Legislative Delegation, Democratic Caucus, and Louisiana Legislative Women's Caucus. I hope I didn't miss anything there, Representative Carpenter.
It's a lot, but I think you got it all, Scott.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us today to discuss second chance hiring. Your resolution was the first of the 2 resolutions that made it to committee. And it was actually my first time testifying before a labor committee. Everything I've done previously has been criminal justice committees. Last night, you and I were on the phone and you shared a story about your recent visit to a gas station. Would you mind sharing, before we get involved into the resolution, sharing what you experienced when you went to get gas the other day?
Not at all, but thank you so much for having me. I've been interested in this topic for quite some time because, first of all, you have to be human in order to really work with people who have been involved in this kind of system. And so I was sharing with Scott, it was my pleasure, first of all, to work with this resolution and get it through the legislature, unanimous vote, which was amazing. But I was telling Scott just last night that I went to get air in my tires at this Texaco service station in Baker, small operation. And so the young man that put the air in my tires was just so gracious and so nice. And he was explaining to me about how much air I should have and all of this. And the other young man just suddenly came out and started washing the windows on the car because it had just rained. And so I always have a talk with the business people in my district. So I went in the office and I was talking to the owner. And I said, man, I said, thank you so much for the air in the car, in the tires and all this stuff. And I said, the gentleman that put the air in it were just fascinating. So then he took a deep breath and he told me who they were. They were justice involved participants. And he went on to tell me that he has made an effort to hire these people over the years because he sees too the need of them being back into society with some kind of occupation that they can live a satisfying life. And so it was just amazing to me. One of the gentlemen, he said, they pick him up and bring him to work because they don't want him to be stigmatized with the way he would come. And so it was just delightful to see how he worked with them and how they were a part of his operation. And to me, that is how we want our business population to be, and to work with people who find themselves in this kind of situation. And I shared that with Scott because little did I know who they were, because they were just like everybody else. And I loved it very much.
Thank you. You bring out a great point. When we go over and when we've gone across the state with our forums, one of the main points is we're talking about what are the benefits of hiring the formerly incarcerated. And I propose a question to business people is what do you want from an employee? Well, you want someone to show up for work. You want someone that's going to make your business profitable, and you want a loyal employee. And that's what we're trying to show, is that there's not a difference outside of running the background check. For most people, you wouldn't have known that they've been justice involved until you look back at their criminal history. And studies have shown as time passes and as time that people have grown up, matured, and gotten away from that, 5, 6, 7 years later down the road, if they haven't incurred any new criminal activity, they have the same chance to recidivate or same chance of committing a crime as any of us do.
Absolutely.
And the studies have also shown that persons, since they're getting the second chance, oftentimes they're more loyal than the average employee because they understand the risk. As a former probation and parole officer, one of the conditions of both parole and probation is to have a job. And
Absolutely.
and we're
Yeah.
running into policies that make it harder for people that have a criminal background to get a job. And I think that's what's so great about the resolution that you introduced, HCR 17. And if you want to take just a few moments to kind of go over what that resolution, was meant to accomplish, and some of your reasons for bringing that forward.
Well, resolution House Concurrent Resolution 17, because the same resolution was introduced on the Senate side as well. And so it received unanimous support, which was really surprising in both chambers of the House and the Senate. And so really the purpose of it was to request that state agencies, and you named some of them, for instance, the Department of Public Safety, Corrections, Louisiana Workforce Commission, and the private sector recognize the value that these justice involved persons, and that in itself had to be explained to my colleagues in the House over and over again as to why we're calling it justice involved persons, because it takes away the stigma of having been in the penal justice system. And so we're asking that they recognize this value that these people have and bring to the workforce and to society. And so we're asking through this resolution that they act with the intention to empower, train, and employ such individuals so that they can have a better quality of life, just like everybody else. So it requested that these state agencies and these entities and private businesses as well remove the barriers to reentry and to cooperate in empowering, training, and employing these citizens. And so it gives them, in other words, a leg up to help them get a head start. And that's all we are asking. And the resolution went through the committees. And so Scott, since you said that was the first time you had to go before Labor. Labor is not an easy committee to come before, I need to tell you. But it was just a pleasure to have to work with that. And I was excited to have the manual that you do have, because many of our colleagues had not seen it. So I had it put on everyone's desk. And so now they can look further into what needs to be done and how they can help in their communities.
Thank you, Representative Carpenter. What we have found, and that was the purpose of Right on Crime creating the employer handbook. Employers, it's an unknown, and they're afraid of kind of what, and you mentioned it earlier, the stigma that is oftentimes associated with hiring someone that has a criminal background. And one of the portions of your resolution spoke about too, the Department of Corrections preparing people pre-release, and we've seen that. We've seen a lot of cooperation over the past few years with workforce development, with lobby, with our local chambers of commerce, with there's a whole group of people, Department of Corrections, even our local nonprofits, our community providers have all come together to try to tackle this issue.
Yes.
And COC has provided a lot of training on the inside, and it's a great program. They have automotives, they have HVAC, they have plumbing, welding. There's even a opportunity to get your bachelor's degree for certain people that have been incarcerated. So getting this information out to employers, letting them know that this is a pool that they should not overlook.
I need to say to you, Scott, too, that there are actually some businesses that have been so involved with helping people like this, that they have taken it upon themselves to help these individuals go back to school. And so many of them pay for them to do that. And so you have a number of them at the community colleges. And we at Southern University have done the same thing with many people who are justice involved citizens. And so it goes further than just the employment thing. They've taken an investment in helping them with the education side of it to help them improve their lives as well. And to me, that's fascinating.
It is definitely a lot more attention being made, because what ends up happening is someone gets this felony label, and even though they've served their time and they've done what the courts have asked them to do, they pay the price through collateral consequences for the rest of their lives. And that's hopefully what we're trying to reward people that have changed, that have made, you know, a difference by choosing a different path and supporting their families and continuing on. Julie, I did not introduce you with the background, but Julie is the Director of State Initiatives and the State Director for Tennessee. She's a graduate of Marshall University and of Regent University School of Law. She attended Georgetown Law Center as a visiting student. While in law school, she clerked on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Julie served 4 years at the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. After a few years in private practice as a civil defense litigator, Julie returned to public service and began her work in the office of the West Virginia Attorney General, where she primarily served as an appellate advocate for the state of West Virginia and as a legislative counsel to the Attorney General. Julie, you've had a total of 7 minutes to prepare to fill in for Senator Reese. So
big shoes to fill, I understand. Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to give you a few minutes to kind of shed some light on what's going on and second chances and employment opportunities.
Well, let me just applaud your work and effort on that resolution, Representative Carpenter, because that really is it really is raids. It was that this idea that creating a stigma that follows an individual for the rest of their life, which should be a deterrent, you know, to crime. There would be prosecutors who would say, you know, this is going to follow you for the rest of your life. Don't be a criminal. And I think that there was this idea that it would create a deterrent, and continuing to punish someone was okay. Like, it was actually built into the criminal justice mentality. And I think that's starting to change a lot, because I think people are now starting to understand it's backfired, because punishing someone for the rest of their lives and never allowing them to assimilate into communities doesn't serve public safety. It doesn't serve the economy. And while it might make certain people feel satisfied that they're really, you know, pushing that sanction as far as they can take it, that punitive impulse, if you will, it's not serving any interest to the greater good. It doesn't serve that individual. It doesn't serve public safety. And we're starting to understand that now, but not completely. There's still a lot of work to do in that space. And so I think that resolution was a very important policy statement to your state. Hopefully other states take notice as well and understand that this idea of a continual punishment, this punishment in perpetuity, as sometimes we call it, does not serve any means to an end. So giving folks the opportunity to say, hey, you know what, you actually can become a productive member of society. We want you to become a productive member of society and not create these unnecessary barriers to accomplishing that goal. Serve everyone. And I think the more and more we're starting to understand that, and there's still some work to be done in that area.
Yes, yes, there is, and what you've said is so on point. And so the resolution even, Julie, goes further to require the state to use the general fund dollars that the Justice Reinvestment Initiative that was passed in 17, I believe, the savings were made to expand the Department of Safety and Corrections reentry initiatives and programs. So there is money there in our state to help with this initiative. And so all people have to do is step up and apply for it. And so it works both ways. The business has an interest in it, the state has an interest in it, and just the community at large. And that's what it's gonna take to cut down on the recidivism of our citizens.
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot of areas in the country where our penal system does a lot of training inside prisons, and then the individual is released just to find out that there are occupational licensing barriers or other barriers that don't even allow them to put any of that training into practice. You know, up until recently, you know, there was, in Tennessee, for instance, we passed a Fresh Start Act, where now an occupational licensing authority can't deny a license based on a criminal history unless they can prove there's a nexus to support a denial. So if somebody wants to be a barber and they were trained to be a barber in prison because a lot of cosmetology skills are taught there, they can't leave, you can't deny them a license to practice the skill that the state taught them because of their criminal history, unless you can prove that there's some sort of direct reason for doing so. And because it just really is almost cruel. It is cruel to say, okay, we're going to teach you this skill, and then you're going to get out, and then we're going to prohibit you from being able to actually apply it for gainful employment. That's exactly,
and it just throws them out there and says, okay, you got this, but you're on your own.
Yeah.
And everyone needs a leg up. You need help. You need a start. And this is what this program helps to do.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I was really excited about this resolution just because I really appreciated the statement that it was making. And I think it's an important time in 2020 with there being so many economic barriers for everybody right now. There's so many things going on that that is frightening folks economically, that I think that making this statement was very important and very timely.
And then too, even with this pandemic, you will find that many of these individuals are in fact frontline workers. Because they come at that level. And so if you just move around and find out some of these businesses where many of these justice enjoyed citizens are employed, they are the frontline workers, and they show up regardless. And that's what's even more fascinating.
Exactly. Julie, you brought up a good point. In the resolution, in both of the resolutions, most of what is in the resolution has been going on for quite some time. The Department of Corrections it has been working very hard. They've recognized that, you know, you have to prepare people. No longer do we need to warehouse someone and have them sit idle in prison to do their time. Programs, as Representative Carpenter mentioned, education is one of the major predictors of recidivism as well. The more education you receive, the less likely chance that you're going to return back to prison. But the Department of Corrections has been actively involved in all of our in-person employer forums. Probation and Parole has worked with us hand in hand in sponsoring these events, because they realize too, when I was a probation and parole officer, the major question that I received from every person that I supervised was, I need a job. Who's hiring? And you know, I'm from a rural area, and you can only send so many people to the one or two, and most of them were mom and pop businesses that wanted to reinvest back into their community, and they understood the value of giving someone a second chance, and that what comes with that as far as keeping their community safe by giving someone the opportunity to work. And this particular resolution just kind of pats everyone on the back that's already been doing this work, but also brings it to the forefront and lets everyone know that the legislature is looking, and that they see and that they recognize what's going on. What we really need is to get businesses to get involved and kind of taking that step forward and overcoming the stigma and giving people a second chance. And I think we see that in a lot of major companies are coming out. SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Managers, has a great toolkit. They are working on educating their members about tapping into this employment pool. So it's been a great unified effort, and that's the only way that we'll get this message out is with all the agencies working together. So again, thanks for bringing this out. And you mentioned earlier some additional steps. In addition to these resolutions in the regular session, Representative DeVilliers had a bill which you supported about using video technology. Because what's happening too is we require people in probation and parole to get a job, but you also require them to report to you once a month. And some employers, and Representative DeVilliers was one of those, is like, I miss an employee for an entire day. So this House Bill 77 would allow probation and parole officers to video conference like we're doing here with people that are employed. And it allows that probation officer to focus on high-risk people and allows the probationer to work. I've had probationers tell me, you punish me because I have a job. I have to sit here for hours while these people are here that don't have jobs. They're not losing out on anything. He says, I lose a day of work. I don't get paid. And he's right. He was like I get paid when I take off. He doesn't get paid when he takes off. So
so he loses a day of work.
Yes, and eventually would lose his job. Senator McMath brought an ID bill, and we called it the laminated resume bill. It's basically when they get out of prison, they would have their major accomplishments on the back of this ID. And you know, in prison, people move and are sent around, and I've seen people with these clear trash bags that hold everything that they've ever had. And it's hard for them to keep track of the certificates and all the things that they've done. So putting it in one form, and allows probation and parole to build a case plan off of that, which is great. Even Representative Duplessis had a bill with letters of incarceration. And you know, you wonder, why would someone need to know this? But people that are incarcerated are also victims of crime with identity theft. They may have traffic warrants and other things, and with this letter, they can show to the courts, hey, I was incarcerated. And other nonprofits that are trying to provide services need proof that these people were in jail during the times, or in prison during the times that they said. So there were a lot of reentry legislation that was passed to help move Louisiana forward. Because we see that you can't just open the doors and let everyone out, but if we can prevent people from going back to prison or into prison in the first place, we accomplish the same goal. With that said, you know, our recidivism rate, which I mentioned earlier, is at 43% after 5 years. Now, the reforms came in 2017, so we haven't yet calculated the new 5-year recidivism rate. And you mentioned about the reinvestment. Over $12 million in the first year went back to reentry efforts in the 5 parishes that contribute the most to our prison population. These resolutions were a great start, but what do you think we can do more to show employers the potential value of justice-involved individuals play in meeting their workforce demands and ultimately growing their businesses?
I personally think that we need to do a better job of explaining the program to the businesses. And I think they're willing, but they don't have the knowledge base as to how it really works. And I feel that as a legislator, that is one of the things that I feel that I could do better, even just in my district alone, is working with people, because we have relationships with the businesses as a legislator. We have relationships with these businesses, but I feel that the only way it's gonna change is that these businesses particularly know the value of it. And they won't know the value of it until somebody just literally sits down with them and says, well, why don't you try this? and explain why it works and give a little history of it. To me, that's the best way to start it. There might be some other legislation coming down the pipe in the next session, and I'm willing to work with the organization with whatever you choose to do with that. But I think that that's a good start with a one-on-one in these communities to start it.
Yeah, and I know in Kentucky, the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce has been a thought leader amongst the business community in criminal justice reform across the board. They've gotten involved from pretrial reform to sentencing, but definitely have been very, very evangelical on the reentry, and they've been a real thought leader in that. And they've been bringing businesses along in Kentucky for a long time. And they've developed a lot of programming and a lot of databases that I think a lot of other chambers of commerce could learn from. So I always tell people, if you have business leaders who are interested and their chambers aren't really engaged in this reentry conversation, call the Kentucky Chamber, because they have done such amazing work. And I know in Kentucky and also in Tennessee, we've been looking at legislation to create some immunity.
We're losing you, Julie.
For employers who are concerned for, protect certain liability exposure for second chance hiring practices. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Off and on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Back to you. I'm sorry.
You still there, Julie? We'll give her a chance to let her cell coverage catch up. You did mention Representative Carpenter, and we have a few things listed out in the handbook, and we want it to be able to give employers something that they can take back, look at in the comfort of their business, and answer questions that they might be afraid to ask, or questions they don't even know to ask. And some of the stigmas or the misconceptions is that your other employees may be afraid. Or that what is the public going to think? Those kind of issues come up, and that's what we've tried to work through with employers in the larger forums that we had, which were a 4-hour half-day process where we had actual employers there that would speak to some of the problems they've had and the successes that they've had.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, Scott, too, because I'm going to go back to my service station in my town. One of the things that the owner said to me was that the employees tend to protect each other. And so they've embraced these two gentlemen. And I thought it was really interesting that he said, one has a friend who brings him lunch. And so the rest of the employees will let him have his lunchtime away from everybody else so he can sit and talk with the person that brought him his lunch for that day on his lunch time. And they decided themselves that they would do that. And to me, that's first of all a human thing to do. And the other thing is that it shows collaboration, acceptance, and the ability to work with people, everybody. And so this is why his business is successful, because of the way they work within that business to make it be successful. And these two gentlemen are included as a part of that team. And so to me, that's what it's all about. And if more businesses and organizations did the same kind of thing, we would lower the rate of return to prison. Simple and clear.
Absolutely. I don't remember the stat right off the top of my head, but at least 1 in 50 people nationwide and in Louisiana have some sort of criminal background. So there is interaction every day that we have with people that have criminal backgrounds, whether it's while we're shopping at the store, whether it's the random act of kindness where someone helps you, with a car problem. You never know, and that's the point we're trying to make. You really can't tell the difference until the background is run, and that's why we encourage employers in that initial interview, get to know the person. If they're qualified, if they can satisfy the needs your business has, then hold off on that background to the very end, and then make your decision based on knowing the person and what their qualifications are, and then consider, does this offense that they committed, how long ago was it? Because that makes a difference.
Right.
If it was last week, they may still be working through whatever has brought them into the justice system, and what type of crime.
Yeah.
If it's a crime against a person, then maybe they shouldn't be at the daycare, but there might be a better place for them to work. But we also want to make sure that these jobs are jobs that pay a livable wage.
Exactly.
Because we're also addressing on the Commission on Justice System funding is, in addition to the collateral consequences, it's very expensive to be on probation or parole.
Of
There's
course
fees,
it is.
fines, court costs, and we're adding more stress and more trouble to a person that can barely find a job. I've
Exactly.
completed as a probation officer the payment plan with people, and they left in tears.
Yeah.
And I looked at it, and it's like, I can't afford all these fees and fines.
It's amazing.
There's no way.
Really
They don't have a job, and
Yeah.
and they look at me in despair, and I said, the judge obviously has to know
Yeah.
that you can't pay, $2,500 a month or
Yeah.
$500 a month.
And Scott, you see, this is what the general public doesn't know. And the public, even if they know it, they don't understand it, because these are things that these people have to do in order to stay out. And it's really troubling for many of them. I'll give you another example. There's a man with a lawn service who I think he served 7 years or whatever. He comes out and he starts a lawn service. Well, it's a thriving lawn service now, and he employs only people who've been incarcerated. And they are excellent, absolutely excellent. And so here's an example of a man who's been incarcerated. He comes out, he becomes a businessman himself, and then he hires other people to help them get on their feet. But then that's when I learned about all of these enormous fees that they have to pay in order to stay out. The probation time, all of that, it's unbelievable. And so a lot of people don't understand what these individuals have to go through just on a daily basis once they're out.
Exactly, because what has happened over the last decade or so is anytime some group needed more money, well, we'll just make these people pay for it. We'll make, if you commit a crime, you have to pay the price. And I mean, it sounds, initially you think, well, that's great, but then they don't have the money to do this. And it creates all this legal debt, which in some cases can lead them going back to prison. But fortunately, in 2017, the reforms recognized that and started, limiting the amount of time, the maximum time for probation. In the past, probation was extended if someone owed fees and fines. That practice has ended. So we're moving in the right direction, but there's a lot of parts that have to move all together, and it takes some time. There's a culture change that has to happen with the general public, with probation and parole, with businesses, with all of us, to be able to incorporate people back into society. We definitely have to create a system that provides for hope, that recognizes redemption. If we don't do that, then what is your purpose to succeed when you come out? You mentioned that there's a lot of conditions. There's 17, 18 conditions of probation, and it's a laundry list of things, and it's things that you and I and the majority of people have no problem following. But when you write it down on a piece of paper and put it out, and it seems to
It's
be a lot more
overwhelming.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah, it's
overwhelming and
overwhelming.
confusing.
Mhm.
There's another legislation that started up, the Clean Slate legislation that Chairman James brought forth, and what that would do is take our process of expungement, which is expensive, and it's complicated, and it would automate that process. So it would help remove one of the barriers for someone when they go in for a background check. If you can't afford the 550, I think we have the most expensive expungement filing fees in the nation.
We do.
This would automate that. And when your time is done and all that set in statute, but when the time has elapsed between your last conviction or when you finished your sentence, that would automatically clear from your record. And even some arrests that did not lead to an adjudication, did not lead to anything other than just arrest, those would automatically be cleared from your rap sheet. I've reviewed rap sheets. Sometimes they're 4 or 5 pages long, and when you get through with it, there's 2 convictions on there, and it's like, my goodness, it's daunting. And if you don't know what you're looking at,
Right.
you can definitely make the wrong judgment either way.
Mhm.
You can make
Exactly.
the assumption that there's nothing wrong, or you can make the assumption there's a lot of things wrong, and you can be wrong on both ends. And that's what you mentioned. That's the education that needs to get out there. Your background's in education. What do you think we could do more in the realm of education for people that are looking for a second chance?
Actually, I feel we have some of these programs, but I think that the community college system does a fairly good job with helping with people in this situation. But I do think that they could do more. And the reason for that is because the community college systems are the ones that provide these short-term trainings, how to be a plumber, a mechanic, all of those where you can come out ready with a job. And so many of these individuals have some of this training while they're incarcerated. And so if you roll them into some programs in the community college system where they can get a license, take what they've learned and move forward with it, I think that would be of great benefit. The four-year institution is a little bit more difficult to do. However, there are many individuals who have high school degrees who have had some years of college and find themselves incarcerated for whatever reason. I think we need to look at what their records are and see how you can help them move forward without having to go back and start all over. But it takes counselors who know how to work that and how to make it happen without having them to expunge everything that they've had or declare academic bankruptcy. So if a person has had a freshman year in college and finds that they have to end up going to prison for whatever reason, you come out, if you can still hold on to those courses that you had in that freshman year, then that gives you a leg up with getting started to get a BS degree or bachelor's degree. To me, that ought to be one of the things we could look at. And that's we've done some of it at Southern, I do know, but even so, then the rules still apply that you have to declare academic bankruptcy after so many years of lapse. But I think some of that can be waived if handled in the right way.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Can you hear me now?
Okay,
Yeah, I'm going to jump in. We in Tennessee, I will brag on Tennessee a little bit. There have been a number of universities and associates and community colleges that have partnered with our Department of Corrections to create associate degree programs and even four-year bachelor degree programs. Lipscomb University has partnered with the women's prison to create four-year bachelors, and there's been a lot of those partnerships created where it's, you know, where resources in the community have been brought to bear inside the prison facilities to create educational programs, and they've been very successful. And
Good.
I think that's a model that I know in Tennessee we're looking to expand on because they have been so successful. And I know that states are starting to see that as a good use of public safety dollars to
Right.
educate people, arm them with education and a certificate when they walk out and say, hey, I have this associate's degree, or I have this training skill now. And so I think that is a very good use of investment dollars.
I'm glad you said that, because I'm going to look at that, and perhaps that might be something we can look at for the next legislative session to see how we can delve into it, see what has already been done, what's in place, and what we can improve upon it. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And I'll also say that one of the first things our governor did when he took office is he zeroed out the expungement fee. So it's $0 as far as the state fee to petition for expungement. And that was passed with overwhelming support in our legislature. So there's a lot of enthusiasm because there's an understanding of the public safety benefit to making assimilation and hope accessible. Giving someone an opportunity benefits the entire community. And that was something that we did in Tennessee that was extremely successful, extremely popular. So I'm hoping more states look into that. I know Kentucky has lowered its expungement fee, but in Tennessee, we zeroed it out. And I think that there's a lot of states that could benefit from taking a look at it from that perspective.
Very good. Yeah.
Hopefully in 2021, our clean slate legislation will pass, which will also reduce the cost actually to zero, and automate the process, which would simplify the entire process, because this is something that is automatic. If you apply and if you do what you need to do, you're going to get the expungement, and it's also great that it will bring the agencies more technology use of kind of centralizing the information and facilitating communications between state police and other agencies and our court systems. Because as we've seen in the Criminal Justice System Funding Commission, it's a complex web. When we get into all the different judicial districts we have, the 64 parishes, how all these things are collected and organized, if we can start moving things a little forward, it would make life a lot simpler for all of us.
Absolutely.
So we'll go ahead and open it up for questions. I don't see any in the queue. If anybody has a question of Representative Carpenter or Julie or myself, feel free to add that in. I went a little longer on our talk because I did not see any questions. So we'll give people a moment or two.
I'll just add while we wait for questions, another idea that I know a lot of states are looking at. Tennessee, our governor's proposing it. Kentucky's chamber has been pushing it. A lot of other chambers have as well. The idea of immunity for employers who are fearful of exposure to liability if they were to employ someone who has been justice involved. There's probably a lot of unnecessary tort liability that can be addressed legislatively. So I know a lot of states, our state's looking at it, and a number of states are looking at it, and a lot of the business community is driving the conversation. So I think that's a
critical piece.
It is, yes.
And we have a legislation. It's limited, but we do have, it's RS 23-291. It was patterned after legislation in Texas that offers employer liability, and it's to get that information out to the employers. Some other states have also worked hand in hand with their departments of insurance in working with businesses on workers' comp insurance, liability insurance. That's also another big factor. We had a question. Someone asked, Actually, they said they were distracted and didn't get to see everything, which is a good lead in. That this will be recorded. We will have access to it on our website, and you should be able to find that in the chat. It's www.rightoncrime.com. That way you can go back and replay this over and over and over. I don't see any other questions. One more question.
I saw a question regarding housing.
You did?
Yes.
Yeah.
Question. Oh, okay. I see that now in the chat box. What we did in the in-person forums is I've worked with the local reentry groups that are in each of the communities, and people like Goodwill, United Way. There are a lot of reentry organizations, nonprofits, many of them are faith-based, that are helping people with housing. Because what happens is when someone comes out, it's job, transportation, and where you're going to live. And all of those are very much intertwined. If you don't have a house or a good place to stay, it's hard for you to keep up with a job. If you don't have a car or vehicle, it's also hard for you to get work. But I would encourage, and if you're in a particular area, the person that asked about housing, if you want to send me an email, I can definitely point you in the right direction for the reentry groups. And DOC works with housing as well.
And housing is a critical issue. I raised the issue. I raised the story of Matthew Charles, who was a high-profile guy who was the first person released in the First Step Act, and was fairly prominent. Was at the White House. Was at the State of the Union. But when he was released, he couldn't find a place to live. People wouldn't rent to him in Nashville. And it wasn't until Kim Kardashian said, I'll front 5 years of rent for him, that he was even able to start having folks at least look at his application. But then he still had a difficult time obtaining property. Eventually he did, but just a lot of renters were concerned about renting to him, despite the fact that, he was at the White House last week at the State of the Union, but he still couldn't find a place to live. And so I think that just shows that there's a lot of work to be done in terms of just educating, providing a system that doesn't penalize renters or penalize property owners unnecessarily for renting to someone with a criminal history. I think we just need to really look at that, because housing is critical, and finding folks safe housing where they can move on with their lives and they're not homeless. How can we expect
absolutely.
successful? How can we expect them to be successful?
You have to have somewhere to live.
Absolutely, it's essential.
Yeah, it is. I'm looking at a note here from former state rep Pat Smith, who's worked a lot with the criminal justice system, Scott, as you know as well. And she says that the Louisiana Women's Prison has a task force that made issues to businesses, I guess, to allow females to pursue jobs when released, made them allow females to pursue jobs when released, and they're working with Tulane on a degree program.
Awesome.
And so that's a good thing, yeah. And so what we need to do, back to education, we need to do that with more institutions beyond just Tulane. So I thank you, Pat, for that. Yeah.
Yes, in our forums, a lot of the local community colleges even hosted our forum. They gave us a space to put it on. And getting back to the women's prison, Sarita Steve with Operation Restoration in New Orleans has been doing wonderful work with the justice involved women. She's a formerly incarcerated individual that started this nonprofit, and she's moving nationwide with fighting for women when they come out. The majority of people incarcerated are men. So the majority of the programs are focused and tailored towards men. And Sarita has seen that need for women when they come out, to be able to support their families, because it's crucial for young mothers when they come out to get that family bond going, getting it back together.
And aside from that too, Scott, women prisoners bring another layer of concern because as said, many of the programs are directed toward men, but women have the child care issues that they have to be cognizant of. And that in itself, even if you're not in the criminal justice system, one way or another is a problem. So compound that with women trying to reconnect with their children and get a job, finding proper child care, and the education piece. It is a lot to bear. And I don't know what the recidivism rate is for female prisoners, but I guess that there are some statistics related to that as well.
And I don't know those offhand, but I'm sure DOC definitely has those in their briefing book.
Yeah.
We had another question or comment from Kwanda Charles, who has been a great advocate and supporter of our employer forums. And she's mentioning the Fidelity Bond program, which is a business insurance policy that insures employers against employee dishonesty, theft, forgery, larceny, and embezzlement. And all that is laid out in our employer handbook. And we will focus an entire webinar series on those type of benefits for employers as well. I think that's all the time we're going to have. I would like to thank Representative Carpenter, and we definitely want to keep Senator Reese and the members of his district in our prayers as they rebuild, and on all of the people in Louisiana. Thank you, Julie, for filling in. Less than 10 minutes notice. You did great. And Representative Carpenter definitely enjoyed this conversation. And we need to have more conversations like this so that we continue to build that relationship with our legislature, with our government agencies, and with private businesses, getting everyone to come together to tackle this problem that doesn't just affect people that are coming out of prison. It affects every last one of us that are citizens here in Louisiana. Our slogan, our motto for these is from tax burdens to taxpayers, and we want people to be able to support themselves and to move forward with their lives, and definitely we want to recognize hope, and we want to recognize redemption, because these are values that we see in our state, especially today after this hurricane. We see people coming together. We see the hope. We see the value that people have for all citizens, and if we can carry that forward and get people to work and remove this stigma for the formerly incarcerated, we will definitely keep our communities safer. We will lower the number of people in prison, and we'll keep families together, and we'll have a great or even better Louisiana. Thank you all. An email will go out this Friday. It will have a link for our next webinar, which is gonna feature Secretary James LeBlanc with DOC. As I mentioned earlier, they have been an active participant, and they're very involved in making this happen. And we'll also have a formerly incarcerated businessman, Josh Smith, who will share his extraordinary story of redemption, success, and he will kind of will contrast Secretary LeBlanc. I'll talk about all the programs that are in there, and we will see how this plays out with someone that was a recipient of some of these programs, although in another state. And registration information will be on that link. So I appreciate everyone. This will be recorded, and you'll be able to find it on our website.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.